Hello, hello, hello. My name is Brock Wilbur. Thrilled to be on the show today. I am a video games writer. I've written for Polygon, Unwinnable, Paste for years and years, etc., etc. I have a boss fight book out about the video game Postal, which I don't love. Is alone in that series in terms of games written by people that don't like the game. So that's a thing. Sometimes bad art deserves criticism too. It's fun. Check it out. I hope you enjoy. That's me, at Brock Wilbur on all social media stuff. Anyway, I wanted to talk today about a game that means a lot to me. And it is a game that means a lot to me because of when it arrived in my life and who it arrived with. So back in 1992, there was a Star Trek game released called Star Trek 25th Anniversary. That was a point-and-click adventure game set in the original Star Trek universe. Kirk, Spock, etc. It came on something like 8 or 9 3.5-inch discs. You know, at the time I was just like, wow, biggest game ever. And I played it with my grandfather on my mother's side, Richard. And Richard was a very important person in my life. Richard, he was this person that was very invested in culture and me and making sure I got it right. And I will forever be thankful to him for that. So we went to the library. We would get a lot of things together, bring it back. He would read them to me. He would show them to me. We would do that sort of thing. I think perhaps the clearest example is that he would show me Animaniacs. He was my grandfather. I'm in grade school. I don't know what he thought Animaniacs was, but we would watch episodes of Animaniacs, and he would recognize that they were spoofs or satires or plays on various things from popular culture, and he'd be like, oh, you thought it was funny because it was a cartoon, and it was just sort of like off the wall and did whatever it was. You'll actually think it's funnier if you understand the context. So, like, especially, there's one episode of Animaniacs that, like, it is just Citizen Kane from start to finish. We watched it. I was like, this is very funny. We got done, and he was very quiet. He was like, all right, well, come on. We have to go to the library. We have to get Citizen Kane. Now you have to watch Citizen Kane. I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what I'm getting into. I did not know I was signing up for like 3 hours of a black and white film as like a 4th grader, but like that is what he would do. And things in the 90s of that pop culture ilk were very good for that, because they were always just like, this is sort of referential. There's something here for the adults. There's something here for the kids. And every time he saw something for the adults, he was like, this is my in to teach him something. So like, it was the reason that he read so many books to me, so many classics and so on and so forth. And my intro to it being like, I don't know, it was a throwaway joke from Yakko, Wacko, and Dot. And then there was this with it. So there are a few things in this world that he loved. One of them, which is complicated, but has a good ending, I promise, is that him, and by extension me, are both direct descendants of Robert E. Lee and of George Washington. And so he had like a room in his house that was just full of like Robert E. Lee books, Washington books, and then a lot of like Patton and Rommel stuff, because look, at a certain age, you just get real into World War II. It's fine. Everyone does. But I do remember the day that I was sort of like old enough to understand what had happened with the Civil War, and to come home and be like, hey, like, I don't think that Robert E. Lee guy was so great, and maybe I don't want to be associated with that. And I will never forget that my grandfather, through and through, statesman and scholar of Robert E. Lee, a person that he was well known to be like blood connected to, as am I, was like, here's the thing about both of them, of both Robert E. Lee and George Washington. The most important things that they ever did in their life was to back down. George Washington could have become king. He was the one that was like, you know what? Nope. I'm done. I'm out. you make somebody else president next. That's the only way that this democracy thing works. And then for Robert E. Lee, it was to be like, hey, I think we could keep this Civil War thing going for a couple years. I'm just going to fucking surrender today. I'm a little bit drunk. I'm real mad at you, Mr. Grant, who Grant was way more of a drunk, so shouldn't rank those in any particular order, but like was like, you know what, I surrender. I will go down in history as a coward, but that saves millions of American lives. And like that was the best thing that both of them did. I was so like, there was the day that like as a kid I was told like, hey, guess what? You come from cowards, but cowards that save lives, and that's important. And part of that ties into what he gave to me in terms of what the rest of his interests were, because he loved science fiction, but he only loved Star Trek. Nothing else. So we would go to the library and I would find things like a Doctor Who or something, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but like it looks like it's in the genre. And I was like, is this something we should watch? And he's like, that's garbage. I don't think he's ever seen a Doctor Who. It's fine. It is also the reason that I didn't see Star Wars until high school, despite being this like weird sci-fi nerd. It was just like, oh yeah, it took me way too long to get there. It's fine. So Star Trek was it. Alone, that was the thing. And what he loved about Star Trek was sort of the social justice aspect of it, the sort of... I think what he saw in it was that if he was a general in Star Trek, he would have the same approach as Kirk or Picard did to so many of these situations. Like, we have to do our best here, and sometimes we have to admit we are not the ones to make the call. We have to figure out something. Anyway, he invested in me through Star Trek and through like the Animaniacs and through, by extension, he goddamn loved Batman the Animated Series, which we would watch together after school while eating Triscuits, because he was like, oh, this is the only cartoon I've ever seen that was made for adults. Because he'd seen the Tim Burton films, and he was like, this is just the same thing. It's the first time I ever remember being like, oh, this is different. This media is different, and it's smarter and better. And to this day, I spend way too much money on Batman and the Animated Series stuff. Anyway, he sort of taught me, I guess, over the course of what I'm explaining here is a media literacy. In that way that I'm like, you know, he died a couple of years ago. If he was around now, he'd be 95, 96. I do not think that any part of weird Facebook shit or QAnon or whatever would trip him up. He has the media literacy to be like, that is true, and that thing is not true, and that thing is bullshit. And he always had the detector there in a way that like even my friends that are my same age do not. So that was always fascinating. So this is all to build to the fact, going back to, it is 1992, and the game Star Trek 25th Anniversary has come out. It is a point-and-click adventure game. It is on the PC. He is the only person in our family who has a PC that can run it with these 8 3.5-inch discs. I think he was the only person in our family who had a computer that would take 3.5-inch discs. I don't know why he was on the cutting edge of that. He had a Prodigy account, and we would surf the web together, and we pursued knowledge in a way that, like, God, I hope when I'm a grandpa, I give it to my kids. Anyway, we loaded up this game, and what came with it was that it is a fascinating, well-done game, an incredible point-and-click adventure game that is basically like 8 episodes of the show spread across 8 acts of a game. But both of us lacked the media literacy for a new form of media, so he did not know what the fuck to do with a point-and-click adventure game in 1992 because he'd never played a video game. And I had played some video games, but I was not old enough or smart enough in like 4th grade, 3rd grade, whenever this hit, to understand how to alternate between dialogue choices, stun phasers, kill phasers, various sorts of items that we picked up, the order that we would find things. Part of this all tied into the fact that we were both forever woven into the problem and the design of the early 90s, which was that there were a lot of games that were, especially in the point-and-click action world, that were designed to be a little bit impenetrable. Like, you kind of knew what you needed to do, but you couldn't quite figure it out. And so the way to figure it out, and Sierra games were fucking monsters for this. This was an Interplay game, and of course they were equally monsters for this, was that there was a 1-900 number, which children of the era were aware, was for sex calls. You would call a 1-900 number and get a sex talking to, and it would cost a lot of money. 1-900 numbers could also be used for tips and tricks in video games. And so the game became, as a sort of a metagame, was that you would call in and that you would have to do this sort of press the number to get into the game, press the number to get into the episode that you were dealing with, so on and so forth. And you would start to try and memorize or write down the numbers so that you could speed through this as quickly as possible, because you were charged by the minute to try to get to whatever the next solution was. Because a lot of this was either some sort of like hide and seek, pixel hunting, like you're trying to find something that like just no human being would ever know was there, or doing something in some sort of order that like nothing in the game would ever tell you that that was the reason to do so, and so on and so forth. So it became this fascinating thing that will remain forever one of my favorite video game experiences, which is me as like a 3rd or 4th grader, a grandfather, trying to crack Star Trek, and then constantly having to do these breaks to call a 1-900 number, navigating as quickly as possible the tip line to try and hear an answer that often was an answer that didn't really tell you what to do either. So like I'd get the answer, I'd slam the phone down, and he'd be like, "What'd he say?" And I'd be like, "They said find the Dover," and we'd look at each other and go, "What the fuck is the Dover?" I don't know. It's some sort of device hidden somewhere in some screen, and then we just spend hours trying to find whatever it was. He introduced me to a show that meant so much to him, and to a form of science and logic and like characters that defined, I think, who he was internally. And then I brought in a video game that showed what I was as a person, and it's like, this is how I engage with media as a kid in 1992. And then somewhere between us, we found a dark space where nothing worked, where we were just constantly unaware of what could happen next, but we were trying everything. And so whenever anything actually went right, even if we'd had the answer and then we were like, the answer didn't make sense, and then we spent hours just clicking away at things and trying to make something work and watching our characters die and die again, we'd have this breakthrough. It's like, oh, we shot just the right point at just the right time, or like we moved into the right room or said the right thing. And the celebrations that we would have are on a scale that I will never celebrate any sort of video game experience ever again. It was 2 of us crossing 60 years, sharing a joy over a fandom that like I don't think I could share with anyone now, or even find a way to replicate. And we would just sit there and just be amazed that we'd done it, and that there was this sense of reward of, oh my God, we cracked it. We're both Sherlock. There's no Sherlock and Watson. We're both Sherlocks, and we're both in Star Trek, and we saved everyone except for maybe the red shirt, and like, oh my God, it's so fucking cool what we just did. So Star Trek 25th Anniversary Edition, and its follow-up, Judgment Rights, which was basically the same thing, where we had the exact same experiences. Forever remains for me this sort of like video game experience that I got to share with the most important person in my life. And we got to share it in a way that it wasn't just like him watching me figure it out. It was both of us doing it together and celebrating the small victories throughout. And so I went back last year to replay them. I've memorized everything. I know exactly how everything goes because of the dozens of hours I spent racking up some real phone bills that his wife, my grandmother, was just like, hey, why did we get charged $100 on the phone bill this month? And we'd look at each other and then like run away from her. Oh, well, because we were trying to figure out how to do a Star Trek. That's where we were. I got to revisit it, and it still feels like he's there. It is a really fun and fascinating thing, and it is one of those rare moments of video games transcending that is based entirely in just when you find them in your life, but also I have very few experiences like that where I can cross it with somebody else and be like, hey, I think it meant as much to them too. And he's not around for me to ask about it, but every time I think back on it and think back on the 2 summers across those 2 games that we spent together every day just trying to crack stuff, I think I'm right. I think we both got the same amount out of it. He never played another video game. I never really dove into Star Trek all that much after that, but we shared that. It's nice and wonderful. And so for a show talking about fun and games, this feels better to talk about than any of the things that I've sunk my time and words into, like a video game about massacring children. So I'm Brock Wilbur, writer of Postal at Boss Fight Books. I am at Brock Wilbur on every platform. Happy gaming.